Hello everybody and welcome back to another D&D Storytime video. And so today this is a story that is known as the Potato Incident, brought in by Raptors Can't Swim over on r/D&D Stories. So this happened around 15 years ago and is still one of my favorite stories. I was 17 at the time and I was GMing a group of 4 players, all a bit older than I. I didn't have much experience GMing, but I had a lot of experience in LARP and writing plots for such. We had played 2 or 3 sessions before the situation began to unfold. The characters were traveling from one town to another, and one of the players kept asking about the landscape, what was happening on the road, whether they met anyone, etc. I hadn't planned anything, but I don't mind doing a bit of description for the ambiance, if that makes the players happy. At one point, I described that they come upon a brown lump that is laying on the road. For some reason, they stop and begin to examine it. I guess they figured that if the DM describes it, it must mean something. I didn't intend it for it to be anything other than a bit of a description, but they take it so seriously, poking and prodding this thing, that I can't help but lean into it. Is it a rock? One of them asks, and I decide to ask, do you touch it? Oh my, did that fire up under them. And yeah, honestly too, so many DMs have noticed this phenomenon, and so with this whole situation, as soon as you ask a question like that as a DM, I just want you to know of this thing called Chekhov's gun. And this is a dramatic principle that says that nothing unnecessary should be in a scene. And even too, this is oftentimes what people can think of where it comes to like subtle foreshadowing, where you bring up a detail, even if it's very insignificant now, it can mean something later. And so for example, with the whole Chekhov's gun example, it's literally saying it's like, oh, there's a gun hanging over the fireplace. And by acknowledging that and letting the reader know that that's something that's going to be happening and really calling attention to it, it means that at some point through the story, that gun should be used in some whatever way. And mind you, this isn't just saying like a gun, this is whatever sort of item. And in this case, it's literally a potato. Matt Mercer had an entire situation with this with just a chair in a room. So trust me, like, as soon as you make something seem important to your players, don't expect them to drop it immediately. But anyways, back to the story. Now they want to poke it with a stick, but taking ridiculous precautions, wanting to roll to do it carefully, suggesting to use move silently as a move carefully check. I allow it and they roll quite low. I describe how they poke it a little harder than they intended and it moves. A bit of dust from the road kicks up. Now the players all want to jump back. 2 of them insist on rolling deck saves to get away from it. They both roll poorly, one of them fails, the other kicks up more dust which gets in the face of one of the other players. He wants to roll to not breathe it in and rolls a 1. I decide to describe how his eyes start getting scratchy, his nose begins to run, and in excruciating detail I describe the feeling of a sneeze coming on, and then the involuntary burst that is the sneeze, without ever saying, you sneeze. In the kerfuffle of it all, the players managed to convince themselves and each other that it wasn't just dust from the literal dust row that had flown up, but something caused by the thing. Now there's no going back. They're going to detect magic and detect evil and much more. To each of the attempts, I say it doesn't seem evil or it doesn't seem to be magical, which only fires them up more. We end up spending a stupid amount of time on them trying to figure out what it is. None of them have any knowledges or skills pertaining to agriculture or food, so I keep it vague for them. It's not apart from any monster you've ever heard of, I tell the guy who rolled an 18 on knowledge dungeoneering. It's not a component in any spell you know, I tell the guy who rolled a 25 on his knowledge arcane, and so on. In the end, they are so befuddled that they end up rolling the thing into a fishing net with a stick and bringing it with them. Throughout the next many sessions, when they weren't doing plot-related stuff, they brought it to multiple different places to have it identified. Not asking, do you know what this is, but going in and paying money to have a wizard cast Identify on it, or have a priest test whether it was from another plane, each time doing it in a way that left no room for me to simply have one of the NPCs go, it's a freaking potato. It was becoming a meme and none of the players had the slightest clue. They truly thought it was a plot device and I was having too much fun to ruin it. Fast forward to a crux in the plot where the players, due to bad decisions on their part, had caused an army to lay siege to a walled-in city, or castle city, and they'd promised to help the city against the siege. The paladin of the group, the jubilant idiot, decides that it would be safer for the town's military to help the citizens to safety, urging everyone to flee, leaving the town empty, promising that the party will stay back and fend off the enemy. I genuinely don't know why he thought this was a good idea, but the rest of the party agreed with him and rolled all the skill checks to convince the people, their allies, to leave. Now alone in a town with a closed gate, they sit atop the portcullis, seeing the battalion that now marches upon them. It seemed they underestimated the size of this army. The leader of said army stops before the gate and demands that the town surrender. or it will be taken by force. While he speaks, the ballistas and trebuchets are being loaded. The players hide behind the armament, and the bard remembers the potato, that they still don't know that this is an effing potato, and decides that this must be what it was intended for, and chucks it at the general. It lands with a thud upon the ground, and the player, excited and nervous, bursts out in a deeply strange laugh. Does your character laugh, or just you? I ask, unsure if he's role-playing that his character has lost it or what's going on. Sure, it's my character too, he decides. I roll to see how the general handles the situation, and roll a 1. I decide to have the general call upon his mage and have him check if the item thrown at him is magical. Have I been cursed? He asks. I decided that since the potato had undergone so much magic in the past half year, that a bit of magical residue is now radiating from it. I roll to decide what the mage makes of this and roll another 1. It's well hidden, but there is certainly something afoot, the mage decides. Which school? The general demands. A bit of spellcasting goes by, and the mage realizes he can't identify it. The paladin here decides to get up on the wall and make a speech about how this item had been bestowed onto them by his god, and how the army should leave or all hell would break loose. He genuinely believed this to be true. He roleplayed the whole thing, making a pretty damn convincing speech, and he rolled well on his intimidate check. Bewildered, the general decides it is best not to mess with it and orders his men to retreat. The town was saved, and the players were cheering. Later they were knighted, and each got their plot of land, the paladin deciding to lay the relic to rest in his basement, where it began to sprout. Only then did they realize it had been an ordinary potato all along. Honestly, I'm going to be so real. There was a little point through the story that I'm like, wow, I think this DM is really just trolling the players specifically just a little too hard with everything, but the ending was definitely much more wholesome and heartwarming than I thought it would be. And I also think it's even, too, that it gets to a point where there's so much action taken with this potato that it's like the universe itself forms around the collective confusion of not knowing what this thing is. Because honestly, too, I really liked the little nuance of having so much magic be cast on this thing that when you actually have someone try to identify it, they're like, this thing is really, really weird. And maybe even just shaping and morphing the potato into just something that's like almost completely different than what it was, but still also, at the end of the day, just being a potato. But yeah, so anyways, DMs, players, story writers in general, Chekhov's gun is a very important principle to remember, especially when it comes to writing campaigns and describing the world around you, because trust me, a story isn't always necessarily going to attack you unless you just feel really called out after reading it. However, within the realm of TTRPGs, sometimes not paying attention to the subtle nods that your DM throws at you can very much so lead to you needing a new character sheet. But then again, at the end of the day, maybe it is just a potato. Regardless, I hope you enjoyed this D&D story, and if you want to hear a little bit more from me, then please like, comment, and subscribe for even more content from yours truly. And until I see you again, keep smiling, keep scheming, and I'll see all of you next time.